Hello and welcome to the Top Order podcast. Just the three of us here tonight, but plenty to cover off. We'll talk about the two-tier test proposal, India's 10-point plan towards team harmony, Champions Trophy squad news, James Vince, maybe even a bit of Pakistan, West Indies, maybe some Jimmy Anderson news, all coming up right after the swish. Raj, there we go. I did it again.
Yeah, well done. Very well done. Good job.
I have to say, I will be very, very grateful to have Baldy back next week so that I can kind of stand there calmly during the intro and don't have to sit there stressing about pressing that swish button. But yeah, let's get to the cricket. And I know we're sort of late to the discussion about this, but we haven't really talked about the two-tier test proposal. That's every time I say that, it seems to be jumbling in my head. But it's floating around there that, at some point soon, India, Australia, and England are planning to talk about, the prospect of raising a system whereby, there's two divisions of Test cricket, 7 teams in one, 7 teams in the other. And I suppose they're going to talk about whether they think this is a good thing, a bad thing, whether they think they can make more money that way, whether they think it's going to benefit the global game. I don't know how much that's going to factor in, but all of those things I suppose are up for discussion. And then I suppose if they like it, it's the next step would be taking it to an ICC board meeting. I saw that New Zealand were asked for comment, and they said they didn't expect it to come to an ICC thing until maybe the second quarter of 2025. So we're probably still a wee way away from it actually coming into discussions. The World Test Championship sort of cycle goes through till 2027. But I do think it's an interesting topic, and so here we are. Here it is on the run sheet. Raj, I guess my first question is, one, do you actually think this has some legs, and could it actually work in reality?
Yeah, look, it's not the first time that this has been discussed. It has been around before. My first sort of question, is this actually a thing? It was reported a couple of weeks ago. The feelers were put out, and there was a bit of consternation, a little bit of excitement, both sides, as to what this would look like. But I guess where I sit on it, I'll jump completely off the fence. I don't really like it. The teams sort of in the bottom tier, I feel, would face some real severe financial issues. I have questions around, is there going to be movement between the two tiers? Is there going to be like a relegation promotion thing? And if so, like as a New Zealand cricketer, New Zealand supporter, New Zealand's not safe from that zone. There, in fact, no one is. But if any team has a particularly poor cycle, they could be dropped to that bottom tier. And you go away from those sort of money tours of India, England, and Australia. That is severely hampering your association, and it will filter all the way down to grassroots. I mean, there is an upside. I think, Jamie, I'll throw to you now about the sort of the lower ranked teams of Ireland all sort of benefiting from it a little bit, and I can see that side too.
Yeah, like I struggled to understand how this was different to what presently exists, and I think we were chatting about the larger test nations, to want a better phrase, typically get the 5-test series. If you're an affiliate nation, you might get 1, you might get 2 or 3 at best. But so I kind of thinking, how is this different? But what this seems to be is probably increasing the number of test matches the islands, the Scotlands, the Afghanistans, Bangladeshis, etc. might play. So which, from a global perspective, you'd like to think will enhance the quality of the global game. I'm not sure that's necessarily the motive. As with all things, it seems to be financially driven. And does this even more complicate the algorithm that is the World Test Championship? Because I'm not even sure I got my head around presently what that is. So if we've now got 2 tiers that feed into that, maybe we all need to retrain and become quantum physicists in order to help us to understand how it is actually that works. But yeah, I'd like to think if it's about like enhancing the quality of the game more broadly, and giving the team like Zimbabwe tour come over to England this year and just get 1 test. I mean, it's kind of like, what is that really? Like it's essentially a warm up for the summer. Who benefits from that? I don't know. Like really, is that who's that developing? If that was a three-test series, and then we fall into that would probably be better in terms of focus and giving Zimbabwean players an opportunity, but equally the schedule, as we know, is always really tight. So we potentially throw more games into an already busy schedule. So
I,
yeah.
I remember we talked about this, Stu, a little bit earlier around when we talked about the World Test Championship and making sure the best teams got to the final. But there wasn't. We sort of said there wasn't really. Yeah, it's hard to judge because there wasn't really equity between the number of games that were played and all of those things.
Mm,
So do you think that this is actually a potential solution to that?
Well, I think the concept, the greater concept of what it could be, in my head, I've come around to it. Like, initial thought was, I hate this. This is stupid. But actually thinking about it, if they could make it, the ideal version of it, which in my head is you make it promotion relegation, it means that, you have your two divisions, there's jeopardy at the top there, you still play for the World Test Championship mace with a final
mm,
maybe for the top two teams. At the bottom of the table, you've got, we could go down. The second division has a playoff, could have a playoff for a promotion, or just the top team goes up. It could be like the Sheffield Shield, maybe, where I think they have a final, don't they? But the team who's in second has to win outright to go up, or to win the Sheffield Shield. I think that all of that is there, and then if you added that to actually creating equity in terms of, everyone has to play three home and away series in that cycle, that you play three tests. I still think you could do that and have like three. Everyone plays. You could still have your Ashes and you have three tests. The first three tests count towards the World Test Championship, or whatever it is going to be called,
mm,
count towards that, and then you have your five test series if you want. My big concern is that, how does this actually play out in reality? Because I
mm,
just think, who is, well, one, who is paying for this? Because to give all of the other, the teams that are in that bottom seven, to give all of those teams that many away tours without playing the other big, the big marquee nations, like Raj said. New Zealand cricket relies on those when England comes here, when India, when India tours. Those really, like, I think they've been pretty open about that, New Zealand cricket, that they kind of pay for some of the other stuff that we do, and I just don't know how that money could ever trickle down. I mean, has anyone got any theories on like could that? I mean, Jamie, in the Premier League, for example, I mean that's one way, but you see it so many times that the teams get relegated, they get that parachute payment or whatever it's called, but sometimes sometimes teams bounce straight back, they bounce back and forth between the divisions. Sometimes
mm.
teams, just plummet and they can't really recover. And yeah, my worry is that it might do that for Test cricket in some of these nations.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you could see teams that will get a bounce, like you say, they get promoted, they get that cash influx, whatever it is. But realistically, is that gonna how much of a legacy does that have? Unless they've invested in youth and unless they've got a strong domestic program, they could just be bouncing backwards and forwards between these two things. But maybe from a spectacle perspective, that's okay because promotion relegation is kind of where it's at, and I know fans of some teams that bounce between the Premier League and Championships. They don't always want to stay in the Premier League, be like 17th, 16th, 15th. They kind of want to probably go down to go to the playoffs to get promoted, to have the trip to Wembley and all that because it's more exciting. So
Mm.
yeah, I'm not sure. The other concern I have is as well, what's the time frame of this? Because for me, like the World Test Championship, it's kind of like I say, probably where I'm at. I don't really know when it starts. I don't really know when it finishes. I don't really know how you how you kind of get into it. I'm being facetious, but if this is like a 2 year cycle, like what's the interest? Like, what's the sustained interest in it? Like, it's not like it's a concerted T20 World Cup or a one day 50 over World Cup, which I guess you can never have in Test cricket, but it's kind of like, like what is the time frame for this, and how much interest are you kind of going to sustain in people? And that would be a concern for me. And I come back as well to like you can't have everything. Like we've got T20 World Cup, we've got ICC Championships Trophy, we've got the 50 over World Cup, we've got Test cricket. Like inside, we've got IPL, we've got the 100, we've got PSL. We've got all of these other SLs. Like it's ridiculous. Like like I kind of think like when will it stop? And I know we'll get on to talking about kind of players and movement around these different formats and stuff later, but yeah, it's kind of like it already feels like it's flooding an already flooded kind of schedule. But
Well, Jamie, I might just come back to you quickly, and then Raj, you can jump in, because the other question I really have is like, do fans want this? I mean, I guess the one of the big arguments has been, is this basically just going to see India, Australia, and England play each other every year, go around, make a whole bunch of money, almost sort of like the Super League was trying to do, with football, trying to grab
mm,
the biggest clubs around the world, put them together, make them play each other over and over again. Like, is I feel like fans don't necessarily want that. Would you? Would you want to play Australia every single year, India every single year, home and away?
no, I mean, from a personal perspective, I think too much familiarity with those teams, kind of reduces the novelty of it. Like the whole thing about England against Australia or England against India is it's kind of like it's on a probably a 2 year cycle or 4 years, down under. You've got that anticipation of 4 years. And I think if it was like every year or every 18 months, it kind of loses its impact. It becomes greed, doesn't it? It just becomes like, oh, here we go again. Like I've often felt like that when England have, Australia have had the come over for a one day series. It's like they just parachute in and it's like, oh, right, Australia are here, and it loses its impact. Well, it does for me. I'm a bit more traditionalist. I think, used to that longer tour. Everything's kind of bolted in. You get everything, and you get that kind of dose of Australia or dose of India or whatever. And yeah, I think too much familiarity could be a bad thing. And going back to the Super League, if you were playing sort of Real Madrid every 6 weeks, the appeal I think would knock off. The idea is that you might play them once in a blue moon, and then it's um, kind of like an event. I mean, as a United fan, it would just be nice to play Real Madrid at any point at this moment. So I'd be happy to take that at any time. So yeah.
So if I take the opposite side, not enough familiarity. Imagine if you were the West Indies and you never got to play Australia
Mm,
or
mm,
England or New Zealand, Sri Lanka, India, all of those people in the top tier. That's a recipe to actually kill cricket in any kind of
absolutely.
organization or country. So, look, I think that there's a lot to be sort of hashed out in this. Whether it actually makes an appearance again, I don't know what happened with the sort of releasing it and then going off to Christmas or going off to New Year's when they released it was what was the reason for doing that? If it was to get a backlash, I think they've sort of got it from some corners and praise from other corners, so they kind of know where they sit. But yeah, I need to know a lot more about it before I sort of jump in behind and support it. I think.
I think I'd need to know as well what's going to give to enable this to happen. Like, because it can't just be an addition to, or this is coming in and we carry on with everything else. Like, it would need to, um, yeah, it kind of needs to be a whole look at the whole schedule, I think.
Yeah, and I think what it's done as well is throw up just what you've said before about the World Test Championship. Like, the World Test Championship clearly isn't perfect, so I don't mind them having these discussions. I actually think that this is, yeah, I think it could be productive as long as everyone does have the right motives, in mind. Because yeah, I think I totally agree with what you guys have said about playing each other, so often. I just don't like. I don't think that's what fans want. I don't think that's how you improve Test cricket. Raj, I think of rugby league, international rugby league, that
Mm.
where there's 2, 3 now, now it's starting to become more interesting because we're seeing Samoa and Tonga and some other nations actually be able to compete, and that's added a bit of extra spice. Whereas before it was pretty much just Australia, England, New Zealand were the three countries that played. The fans didn't really care. The players didn't really care compared to other things that they had going on. So I think if we're trying to think of ways to, for the players to ward off the threat of, actually going and just being a league cricketer and all of those kind of, a divisional cricketer, then and actually still want to play Test cricket, then yeah, we run the risk of doing that. I think if we don't, if they didn't do this, if they did it and they didn't do it in the right way, so it's scary sort of stuff for me there.
Just a thought I did have as well, is that UEFA, again using the football example, but UEFA created the Nations League as a kind of a tournament that feeds in the years between the European Championship, and that has obviously promotion and relegation. But as an England football fan, like what's my interest in that? Well, like pretty minimal, I have to be honest, because it just looks like it's a glorified way of just creating more money and
Mm.
battering players that are already battered. And it kind of, yeah. But so for the larger footballing nations, it just seems like I'm not sure about this. But if you're kind of like the lower European, the smaller European nations, again, it's an opportunity to play better football against better oppositions and with more frequency. So it seems to be benefiting those, which I think is really good, but probably don't involve. It's difficult, isn't it? Because if you don't involve the larger ones, maybe people won't go and watch the games.
Mm.
So it's kind of a tricky balance. You kind of got to have everyone in to make it work. And I guess it's the same thing with the two-tier test system. You couldn't
Mm.
just have tier two and do their stuff because it probably wouldn't work necessarily. So yeah,
Mm.
sorry, gone off track there.
Okay.
No, and I think the funds thing is a huge issue, and let's see how it all develops. I sort of, in a way, I do hope it gets to an ICC meeting, at least to sort of do what we're doing here, talk it through. Does that mean that the World Test Championship isn't working? All those kind of, discussions around all of that stuff. Let's move on then to an ICC event where they have restricted the teams quite significantly, down to only 8. The Champions Trophy. A lot of the squads have already been named. A little while ago, England named their team. I think at the end of last year's or 2023 World Cup, it seems to have been out for a long time. This squad, which is great. England seems to do that. New Zealand named it last week. Raj and I talked a bit about it on our New Zealand focused episode the other day. But India has just named their team. There are a few other teams that we haven't named and sort of talked about so far. Raj, anything that's kind of caught your eye about the announcements over the last few days?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of team naming, yeah, it's been a bit interesting. The sort of philosophy of the Indian team. They look like they've picked a team or a squad where they think they'll be finding spin friendly conditions, sort of based
Mm.
on the squad. Whereas if you look at sort of the New Zealand squad, the England squad, it all seems to be full of sort of the pace battery it's definitely full. Um, Shami is back in, and Siraj has dropped out of that Indian squad. Bit of a gamble, I think. I mean, Shami's going to play in those T20s, I believe, against England beforehand, so we will get a look at how he's come back from that injury. But having such a long layoff is going to be interesting to see how he comes back into that team. And the other thing I think is interesting, I guess, you mentioned 2023 there. I feel like this is a very different conversation about the Indian team than we had when that 2023 World Cup came out. I find it interesting that they've got a little bit of blind faith in the top 5 of sort of Rohit, Gill, Kohli, Iyer, and KL Rahul. They sort of have picked those 5 and they think that they're going to be the top 5 all the way through, with Jaiswal probably there as a bit of a reserve at the moment. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, we'll see if that, along with that 10-point policy document for Team India will hold them in good stead.
Yeah, well, I just on the India team, I do think Punt's going to have to come back in there somewhere. So I don't know. Maybe it's for KL Rahul. I don't know what Yeah, I think there are some interesting questions. If I was picking that side, I cannot believe you would ever leave Yashasvi Jaiswal out of the top 11. I just think he's got to be. He's such an amazing cricketer. He's shown in the Test game. He's shown he can do it in T20s. The ODI is obviously a mixture of the two of those. Yeah, I just think you have to have him there. But I don't know. I mean, Jamie, I'll come to you in a second because I want to, while we're on India, let's talk about this 10-point plan that they've got because I find it quite interesting in a number of ways. But I will just say on the India side, it definitely, when I saw it, it looks like it looks like kind of the swan song. We're going to give this group one last. They performed incredibly well in the 2023 World Cup. Obviously them not winning that tournament puts a downer on that for I'm sure a lot of Indian fans. For people when they look back at that tournament, they don't kind of remember how good India was at that World Cup until that final game. So I think that probably this group deserved another opportunity to win a 50 over ICC tournament, but Gautam Gambhir is he's got to be feeling a pressure, feeling his seat's got to be getting pretty hot in terms of the results that he's had in recent times. And I think this 10-point plan feels to me like sort of I don't know if it's a reaction to that. It feels to me like basically an admittance that something isn't quite right in the camp, that they have to go out and do this. I mean, Jamie, we normally try and just stick to cricket, but obviously you've got the the psychology in your everyday life. I mean, is this the kind of thing that teams would all have in their background anyway, but the fact that it's come out is revealing? I mean, yeah, take us through the fact that like, would all teams have these sort of behavior plans in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think probably if a team is playing well, these things don't come out. So because you're probably doing these things pretty naturally, or if you've got players that are, dare I say, committed and highly motivated, they're possibly doing these things anyway. I'm not suggesting Indian players aren't motivated or committed, but maybe something's not quite right. I think it's interesting it does come out. I think in certainly the teams that I'd be familiar with, we'd have processes around kind of things around sleep and diet and rest and recovery and but I think the more seasoned you become and the more experienced you become, you kind of naturally figure these things out. So if the really good pros, the really good athletes, will naturally have these processes in place. But like I say, I'm not suggesting Indian players aren't those things, but maybe it's kind of a need to reinforce those things. Maybe sometimes complacency can set in, like we see that with all sports teams, don't we? Sometimes they think they're better than what they are, and actually technically, tactically, they'd be amazing, but actually the fundamentals they take their eye off a little bit, and maybe the other teams do those things better. Might not be as good tactically or technically, but they do those fundamentals better. And that can often even the playing field. So yeah, I think it's fascinating actually at that level. You kind of feel the need to reinforce them. Like I said, the expectation would be at that kind of level, those things are probably fairly ingrained. Um, or maybe they've just by osmosis because they're really super talented players. They've got there by talent rather than some of those things. I'm not. Does that make any sense? Yeah.
It's an interesting one. Like I feel like a lot of the things that were in that document, as you said, Jamie, good teams would sort of just do anyway. Um,
Mm.
the one that sort of let me. There's a lot of language in this release, this statement where they use language like the BCCI could do something, or the players
Mm.
could do this. Something is
Mm.
discouraged. The BCCI reserve the right to do this. So it's an interesting document in itself that it feels like it is put there to definitely foster some change and change some culture, but it's not going to apply to perhaps everybody. Like, for example, playing domestic cricket. How much time is there actually in a sort of an international cricket window where you also have domestic cricket going on in your country that you can actually play? That was a point that Rohit Sharma made in one of the latest sort of interviews he did. Families on tour. Well, what's the benefit of stopping families going on tour? Maybe more focus on the playing group rather than sort of going separate ways. But it's one of those things where it's just a balance. There needs to be a balance between having your family on tour. If you're going away on a massive Ashes tour, a massive tour to Australia, they've just gone on a 5-test tour to Australia. You sort of need your family there for a lot of it. Otherwise, it's going to stop you playing well
Absolutely.
all the way through it.
Yeah.
So it's just a very interesting one. The traveling to tours, traveling on tours, games, training together. That's something that I would expect that happens sort of anyway. But I
Mm.
feel like I have heard a lot of chatter about, they talk about sort of the old Indian players like Sourav Ganguly. He never travelled on the team bus, apparently. He always sort of did his own thing and got sort of a taxi to the ground. But these are things that I think good teams already sort of do. And I feel like
Mm.
there is a little bit of show to this about we're bringing back this thing into sort of our culture, but maybe it doesn't apply to everyone because they reserve the right to choose who and when it applies. What do you
Yeah.
reckon, Stu? Or Jamie? Sorry.
You go, Jamie, and I'll jump in after you.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? Because like all the data would suggest that one of the biggest stresses for people when they're away on tour is kind of the distance from family and close relationships. So, a lot of teams have gone to a lot of lengths over the years to kind of reduce that stressor by either having families travel out for certain times or having them travel completely if available. Um, and there's really good rationale for that. It doesn't mean that people are going to be sidetracked. It actually means it's pretty useful. I remember, Marcus Trescothick's book. A lot of his stresses were to do with being away from home and seeing a catastrophic event and on CCTV. So you try and reduce that. I think the traveling on the team coach. I mean, for me, that's a non-negotiable. Like, if you're trying to, if you were a team you do those things together. Doesn't mean that you've got to like walk around in everyone's pocket all the time, but surely you've got to arrive at the game together. You've got to leave together. You've got to arrive at training together. Or else otherwise, like we're just a collection of individuals who rock up and bash a few balls about and then do our own thing. So, like I said, I would expect those things in good teams to be happening. But clearly, they think that a reboot needs to happen. Clearly, people have probably been driving themselves to games or doing their own thing. So it's a bit of a reboot. It's a bit of a control alt delete, isn't it? To say,
Hmm.
okay, right, we've got to restart the system here, and we're starting at a fairly basic level because maybe some individuals are not playing domestic cricket or taking liberties in terms of travel to and from events or things like this. Sorry, Stu, I'll pass over to you, mate.
No, that's totally what I think this surely is. Like, surely this is them saying, like, our team culture is not quite right at the moment, and whether this, I'd love to know sort of who has been, who sort of orchestrated this getting out to the media. Is this something that Gautam Gambhir wanted to make very clear, or the BCCI wanted to make very clear that, hey, all of you players, we need to follow this. Like you said, Raj, I don't think anyone's going to be sanctioned for this. I think what it would mean is, if you're not doing this is basically, I would hope, Gautam Gambhir and the coaching staff and the BCCI saying, look, if you're not going to be on the bus, literally, if you're not going to be on the bus, then you're not actually going to be on the bus anymore. Like, we're not going to invite you to come
Yeah.
on the bus anymore because, we need a united team. It suggests to me that the team, wasn't very united in Australia. We sort of had floated that idea when we were talking about that series that it didn't look like they were as connected as maybe they could be. So, yeah, I don't know. Really, again, we're just pie in the sky. We don't know what's actually going on in that dressing room, but it does have that feel of when taking it back to the squad. Okay, guys, this group has performed incredibly well, in white ball cricket, and in red ball cricket, but in 50 over format for a long time. Here's your opportunity. We gave it to you in the T20 World Cup. You delivered. You won that tournament. here's an opportunity to do the same, win another ICC trophy. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to start changing things. And whether that means, some of the older players have to move on, whether that means, I don't know, there are other players in that squad that Gambier or the BCCI or whoever, are ready to sort of move on from. We shall see when that tournament plays out.
I think the
I
most
think.
sort of profound thing was actually what you said earlier, Jamie, that this stuff comes about when you're not winning. So it's taken sort of 2, 3 series where things have probably not gone India's way. I mean, there was signs were there back in the Bangladesh tour of India, and then obviously it's sort of they got destroyed by a great Kiwi side, and then the sort of tour of Australia. So look, it's one of those things that rears its ugly head when things aren't going well. And I guess what I'm saying is I respect the fact that they have kind of taken this drastic measure and gone, we need to get back on track and everyone needs to get on the bus. Great Nathan Cleary
Mm.
quote as well. Sorry, over to you, Jamie.
Yeah, I do. I always think with stuff like this, because if this is the end of the road for this particular team, and they're using this as a bit of a rubric to kind of score people against or to leverage people out of the team, then that's fine. But don't make it short lived. Make this a long term strategy. And sometimes you always wonder that these things are a function of who the leader, who the captain is at that moment in time. So if you get a new captain come in, or they'll have another 10-point report, or like it's just like you going, right, okay, we're pinning the colours to the mast. This is where we want to go for the next 5 years, right? We stick by that. These are the expectations we have of players that step into this environment. And I'd like to think it is that. I hope it isn't just a kind of, final sort of, right, we're just going to do this because we're annoyed where these players are at and some of the behaviours, and it'll be short-lived. I hope it is a long-term thing. Else, otherwise, you never quite get the culture reboot, I guess. You just end up, just kind of constantly evolving and never really achieve anything.
And if and I guess the first chance for that reboot is going to be in this white ball series that we alluded to against England. There, the
Mm.
T20s are I think start in a couple of days, then followed by ODIs. Back to the India squad. I guess they have named Jasprit Bumrah in that side. It sounded like he might miss the first couple of. The fact that they said he might miss the first couple of ODIs gave me some hope that they don't think it's serious enough that he's at great risk to miss the Champions Trophy, which I think for them obviously is huge news. But on the England side of things, Jamie, tell me how you're sort of feeling about the squad. I know you guys might have touched on it before in that other England episode, but I'm fascinated to hear. I guess like when I look at the England squad, I think, okay, that's McCullum. McCullum has given reward, or he's shown his faith in a lot of that core group that have
Mm.
he's really built rapport with in the test side and believes can do a job in the one day lineup. But in terms of like who is the best 11 for England, we've had so much fragmentation for in the white ball and red ball stuff for England. We've had different coaches. We've had tours starting like one day after a test tour has been starting in a different country. Like, do you have any sense of like what is the best 11 for England? What you'd like to see, kind of who you want to perform in this series to sort of make sure that they're definitely in that team on game one of the Champions Trophy?
Yeah, I had a real headache with this because it was a bit like trying to get a quart into a pint pot, and I, I really struggled. So I was looking at it was like England have got, we've got quite a lot of riches there, and then I'm thinking, okay, right, how does this kind of fit in? So uh, I kind of maybe against popular opinion and playing in the subcontinent, but I didn't really have much option when looking at the squad. Was that I had to go with pace. So because apart from Rashid, who's nailed on in my 11, you haven't really got any other spin options. Well, Livingston, I guess, with his variations. So I've gone full on pace attack. I'd go with Archer, Atkinson, and Wood. But then I'm pretty much relying on those pitches being quite conducive to to pace or reverse swing, or then the expectation that these players can then bowl cutters and maybe just take a bit off, slow ball bounces, etc. If needed. Um, the bit I had the real problem with was the batting lineup, um, being torn between kind of like statistically who are the best players in the world versus the view of looking forward and trying to create. So I have got Root in there, and I'd have him at three because I think he's the linchpin, like he could just bat through if needed. And I think I looked at the other England players and I wasn't necessarily sure I could see that in anybody else. That if you were struggling, 15 for three, was there a player that could kind of bat through and get you out of that? And Root was my sort of the go-to. Um, I got a fairly long batting lineup, if I'm honest with you. And I'd got Livingston in there. I tried to look at multi-dimensional players. Probably the one multi-dimensional player I haven't got is Duckett, but I would have him opening. But I was thinking, well, he's a great fielder, but yeah. So two dimensions, but I guess in terms of all the other players I've probably gone for, they're pretty multi-dimensional. Um, I picked Butler as a wicket keeper, but then the big question I had when I did that was like, well, is he going to keep? I can't. I'm not sure if he's keeping anymore. So I wasn't sure. So I had no space for Jamie Smith because I'd essentially gone Duckett, Salt, Root, Brook, Bethel, Livingston, Butler. That was kind of my sort of top seven with Rashid, Archer, Atkinson, and Wood just sort of picking it up. So I got really a blend of um, kind of the a bit of the young, but also kind of giving Livingston, I guess, another opportunity, bringing Butler in there. Obviously, he's captain, um, but giving him that role of wicket keeper. Whether I'd bat him at seven, as I've got him here, probably not. But I could see that order being quite fluid. But I did go for Root. So yeah, I'm not sure I've answered your question, mate. It's all over the. It gave me a headache because then I'm thinking, crikey, like I've left my mood out of that, and he could be really useful when it's reversing. So yeah, like
So I guess we are a little bit at sixes and sevens, and we were talking about that a bit with the New Zealand squad when we did our New Zealand episode as well. Do you think this series against India, which is a blessing if you're sort of the English team playing India, sort of in the subcontinent before this tournament, do you think that McCullum has already got his best 11? He knows who they are, and this is about sort of ramping up towards the Champions Trophy, or do you think he's still searching for something?
yeah, I guess we'll probably see in the selection because there's a school of thought that says actually, if you know what your team is, why not? We spoke about this before. Build momentum, get them used to playing together in fairly similar conditions, I guess. Or do you hold by doing that, you're playing all your cards, aren't you? You're showing your full deck, versus actually, I know what my best 11 is. These three ODIs that we've got are about giving people playing experience so that everyone's potentially then ready for the ICC games, knowing that whole 15-man squad is going to get some game time. Um, so yeah, I think yeah, I'm not sure we'll know until probably that second ODI actually, because if the team
Mm.
changes drastically, then we'll probably get an insight into bit whether players are being rested. Always the concern for me would be Mark Wood. Like for me, he's got to be on the plane. He's got to be fit and ready for November. Um, but that doesn't mean you're not going to play him, but I think you just got to manage that workload. Similar with Archer as well, he has to be on that plane for me in November. So now it's just about ramping up his game time, I think, and making sure that there are no repercussions. I think we've discussed about Atkinson. He's kind of flourished. He's on a bit of a crest. Give him just keep that going. I didn't bring Bryson Carson because me and Binksy had eulogised about how well he'd done, but I was kind of like, equally, yeah, if you're not sure about Wood, Bryson Carson would come in there, but he's probably a different proposition, I think, on in the subcontinent Probably. I'm not sure I'd see Bryson Castle reversing it. I don't know. Probably just killed his international career by saying that, but I don't know. You know.
Uh, I
Uh,
do think that the general squads have been quite telling in terms of, like you mentioned it before, Raj. Some squads, England, New Zealand, even South Africa, to some degree, have really gone. Okay, well, we're going to have spin bowling all rounders, and we're going to have absolute, our fastest bowlers. It seems like that's what cost Jacob Duffy his opportunity to to be in the squad. He obviously performed really well against Sri Lanka. But Raj, you were making a point about the Australians before. I mean, I guess there's injury doubts. It sounds like Hazelwood, should be fit. Pat Cummins is now in doubt. What is their makeup? Because obviously they're the reigning ODI champions at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think they're sort of playing us for fools, the Aussies. They always seem to be a little bit, unsure, a little bit confused about what their squad, what their 11 looks like going into one of these tournaments, but they always seem to be there at the end. When I looked at their squad, I sort of, a couple of points I wanted to take out of it. We'll have to get Baldy's take when he's back. With Pat Cummins being away on paternity leave, he also is having a scan on his ankle, which I didn't know about. I
Mm.
saw that a couple of days ago. And Pat Cummins and Hazelwood, their fitness or being unfit changes the look of that bowling lineup quite drastically. So I think they've got a very, very heavy reliance on those two being fit, or at least one of them being fit, to execute the game plans that they've got. You mentioned that they have. You mentioned that a lot of teams have picked their out and out fastest bowlers or spinners. Australia's taken a little bit of a different tack. They've included the likes of Stoinis and maybe Marsh could bowl a few as well. That they've got those slower sort of dibbly dobbly bowlers, which might, you never know what kind of pitches you're going to find. There might
mm,
be a master stroke. And then the sort of the shame along the same lines of Duffy missing out. I thought it was a shame that Cooper Conley didn't make it through. He really is a future superstar, and going to the subcontinent, someone who can bat like he can, and then having someone who can bowl spin, having that spinning all rounder I thought would have been quite useful in those conditions. But we'll see plenty of him in the future. Don't you worry.
And I mean, yeah, we're talking about pitches. I guess maybe we quickly segue to what's going on in Pakistan right now, which seems like pretty much a repeat of what went on in the final two tests, Pakistan against England, that we saw earlier on. I mean, I know that most of us sort of haven't seen a huge amount of it. I've seen some wonderful highlights for me of Sajid Khan just going through the gate and took a really nice return catch as well, but. I'm sort of keen to get your thoughts on really just the general tone of, I guess, what is possibly happening over there in terms of how they want to build or how they want to produce their pitches for Test cricket. I mean, pitches are always such a controversial topic. Everyone gets very, very aggressive about how you discuss certain pitches. I think Australia certainly. Personally, I don't have any huge problem with home advantage in pitches. I think you should be using your home advantage. You should be making use of that. We've seen Test cricket this year. It's been all over the place. So, I think you have to make use of your home conditions and excel in
mm,
your conditions. But then there's a degree to that. And obviously that can sometimes backfire. I mean, there were spinning pitches in India and New Zealand was able to use their spinners and beat India with their spinners. Actually thought those pitches were totally fine, if we're, going round in circles here. But what do we make of, I guess, what's going on over in, Pakistan, West Indies? Is it a little bit of a case of the West Indies batting lineup just isn't very good at the moment? And, Pakistan's in Sajid Khan and Noman Ali have found a bit of a formula. But is it, this test is going to be over on day 3. If it wasn't for weather, it could have been over in day 2. Whether they get to 180 overs in the test is sort of the question I have, unless the West Indies are smashing it. They were 54 for 5 in their second innings at lunch as I was, clicking record on this episode. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Raj, what do we make of, like, 2-day, 3-day tests that actually seem to be happening all around the world more often than not sometimes at the moment.
Yeah, look, for me, I'm not a massive fan of these sort of 2-3 day tests because we don't get to see anyone bat. Well, actually, we get to see everyone bat actually,
Twice.
but we don't get to see them. We don't get to see them score any runs. I liken this. This is very similar to sort of the Indian sort of what Indian tours looked like, sort of between that sort of 2011, 2015, around that period. There was that one sort of famous tour where South Africa went there and just looked like it was lucky if you got some part of your body on it and could run. Um, I just don't think it's good. It's not good for Pakistan's development either. I mean, no one's going to go. No one's going to be able to go to Pakistan and win in their home conditions like this. But it's not great for what we're trying to do with Test cricket in terms of bring the fans back, and it's not good for Pakistan when they have to go around the world and play it. It's a very sort of one-dimensional play for me. They're going to try and score as many runs as they can, and then bowl 90% of their overs a spin. I just don't think it's when they've got assets like they do with fast bowling. It's not a great way to develop their cricket. I don't feel, and I just I have no desire to go and watch these highlights. I'm sure you do, Stu, to go and watch these spin bowling highlights. But yeah, for me, it's just not cricket. What do you reckon, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm all for kind of like using home advantage because I think I think that's important. Also otherwise you just get the same cricket played all around the world. So I think always the challenge of going to the subcontinent. The expectation is it will turn, and you will face spinners that are probably quite unorthodox and things like that. I think that is a challenge. Equally, you go to the West Indies, and in the 80s and 90s, it was fast and bouncy, and I think again, if I was a player at that level, I'd like to think I'd be pretty motivated by that, like mastering my game. Right, I've got to play in these various conditions. That keeps me sharp. It means I've got to learn. I wonder if there's an element of boredom in some players. If you go, right, I'm going to play on another flat deck, and we're going to get 800, and that's going to be in Lahore, or it's going to be in Perth, or it's going to. So I think like there's an element of you want a bit of you know, like variance on that. But I think you go too far where, if it's turning round corners, like it doesn't become a game anymore. That just becomes it's like, somebody charging in at 90 mile an hour and it's shooting across the floor. That isn't competitive. That's you could go and get that on a park. It's kind of like there has to be a fine balance. I think for me, the propeller fans in the that was enough. I was kind of like, there's something not quite right here. Like in terms of, I just thought, yeah. At what point is that manufacturing a pitch? And I guess there's an element of manufacturing in all home test pitches, but based on local grounds person's knowledge and the experience, rather than we're gonna dry this out, we're gonna bake this or whatever. And so I think. It'd be interesting to know what the directives are from sort of like Pakistan cricket around their test pitches. Because if you're the fast bowler, you're thinking there's no point in charging in here, is there? Like I'm going to charge in for 3 overs, and then I may as well bowl 80 mile an hour, 75 mile an hour, because that's where I get my value. So it's not, as Raj said, it's not great for developing talent, I don't think. And who wants to watch a 2-day test? I don't. I want to probably see at least it go to day four, and probably into day five. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I've answered your question, Stu, but I think I suppose in essence, home advantage is important, but it has to be. It can't be so one-sided. You kind of want it to be 60-40, I suppose, where you're asking the opposition to develop their skills and deal with the deal with the context rather than it feels like it's 70-30 or 80-20 in some situations.
Go on, Stu. Tell us how it's been spin bowling masterclass, and batsmen need to apply themselves more.
Hey,
Yeah,
I do think that I do think that I agree. I agree with a lot of your points. I want to see, everyone wants to see the ideal pitch where, seam bowlers can play a part in the first day or two, batters have day 2 and 3, spin comes into play day 4 or 5. That's not necessarily reality. It doesn't seem to be a reality, to be honest, almost anywhere around the world. So I don't, I'm not. This is certainly not having a go at Pakistan. Part of me thinks, Pakistan were really struggling to win tests and have figured out a way to win, and
Yeah.
I sort of applaud them for doing that. The on the it getting a bit ridiculous sense, I think back to when New Zealand were in Bangladesh not that long ago. The one where Glenn Phillips ended up batting a little, Phillips and Santner ended up getting us home. That pitch there, it had gone to the. I think it did get a poor rating or below par rating on from the ICC. It was to the point where like you said before, Raj, you actually couldn't bat. You couldn't play a proper shot, and if the bowler bowled the ball in the right place, you couldn't play a proper cricket shot because you just had no idea if it was going to bounce. You had no idea how much it was going to spin. Everything went out the window, and it was pretty much pure luck in getting to that. Or someone bowled a bad ball and you smashed it out of the park, and that's how you were able to kind of get enough runs. I do think on the other side of things, though, what this has shown, thinking out loud now, I'm thinking, there were some pretty low scores in the Border Gavaskar, but, thinking back to the New Zealand-India series as well, I do think that sides, and I don't know how they do it, sides outside of these conditions need to find a way to improve at playing spin, because I don't think there are many sides around the world that bat against spin well anymore. And you go and you see any pitch that starts to take turn, it becomes a problem, and maybe that's a factor of the way that spin has taken charge in white ball cricket, and spin is very, very important, but those pitches are just so different. So people face a lot of spin, but they don't face it in the way that they're going to be challenged in a test game. So, as I said, lots and lots of questions that this is all thrown up, but I don't really have the answers to them at this stage. Why don't we? Oh no, you, Jamie.
Yeah, just a quick point. It feels like it feels like the Test nations get caught, or teams get caught between a rock and a hard place, because it feels like, to win Test matches, or to win any game of cricket, you need pace and you need spin. So what they're trying to create is this like perfect mixture of, well, we need to create opportunities for people to develop that skill and this skill, and it's kind of like they then get caught where they probably don't produce either, or they produce a pitch which is so much more one-sided. It's either really, really quick and you can score 900 on it, or it's a Bunsen burner and you're going to be 80 for 8, and it's probably really, really difficult to create that perfect pitch. But I think it's probably driven by this obsession with, we've got to have world-class spinners and we've got to have world-class pace bowlers, because statistically we know that gives us probably the best advantage of either taking 20 wickets or conceding few runs in a ODI or white ball game.
Has anyone got the score up there? We're not. My conversation's not going to look completely ridiculous when the West Indies have, with their last 5 wickets, gone out and smashed it and won this game and made that happen.
They're 111 for 6, and they need 140 runs.
Oh, so okay.
But
they're putting
the good thing is that they've got 2 days in hand.
Okay, so they are putting up a bit of a fight there. The lower order, I know, put up a bit of a fight in that first innings. So we shall see. Maybe the West Indies will come through, and Pakistan's strategy there will backfire. But I guess just sort of finishing, probably round out the podcast with staying in Pakistan again. We've seen the PSL draft has happened, and Binksy threw something that I thought was quite interesting into our chat. And Jamie, I'm probably going to come to you about it, because I don't understand why he thinks it's as significant as, so this is James Vince. So, James Vince has basically, from what I understand, has, stepped away from his county contract, stepped away from, the English system in a way to say, because England weren't giving the non-compete, they were saying, you can't if you've got a contract with English cricket, you can't then go and compete in the PSL and certain other leagues, or I think it's all of them, isn't it? Apart from the
Yeah,
IPL.
the IPL,
Um,
yeah.
but I don't understand why this. Binksy said he thought it was like super significant in terms of even just global cricket, like what this could mean for all sorts of players. But why is this not the same as like what Trent Boult did a few years ago in terms of stepping aside from his New Zealand contract to go and play league cricket around the world, or maybe what Finn Allen has done, or Tim Seifert? I don't actually know that. Like, why is it more significant than that, or is it just different because England takes a harder line than because New Zealand cricket has basically gone since that moment? They've it seems like they're softening their stance towards the international leagues by the year, basically, and becoming more flexible and letting people go on casual contracts. We've got Conway and Williamson on those contracts at the moment. Yeah, run me through, I guess, what this could mean in terms of English cricket.
Yeah, I think Binksy's point, speaking on his behalf, and I guess my interpretation slightly is that maybe this kind of could open the floodgates for more players to do this that are kind of on the sort of the back burner of England. It's almost saying, okay, I'm taking the decision to close that door rather than letting the ECB close the door for you. And then it's kind of like, actually, I'm going to pursue my own endeavours. So it means potentially the pool of which England can choose from, I guess, could get smaller if they're still quite hard lined about central contracts and what you can do within and around that. Um, like you say, though, it's not uncommon around the world for players to do this type of thing. I think what it does do is it's kind of a bit of it's potentially it shows where the county game perhaps is at more so. It's a little bit like saying I'm stepping away from that because I mean, there's some personal reasons as to why he's doing that as well. But I think it's almost saying my career is going to be better from not playing domestic cricket or not playing as much domestic cricket, and I think that's potentially quite harming
Mm.
for a player who is a county captain who's been at a county for a long, long time. It's kind of now saying, actually, yeah, my career is going in another direction. You could argue how different is that from somebody like Livingston and so forth. It's probably not. It's probably not somebody who plays fundamental a lot of, domestic red ball stuff. But I think for Vince, it's pretty telling. Um, I think it also raises the idea of we were talking before about the nomadic player and kind of whose responsibility now is James Vince? Well, James Vince is arguably James Vince Professional Cricketer Limited, isn't he? He's not necessarily affiliated to anybody, and I think this really changes the face potentially of what players are. That actually they're their own team. They're effectively tennis players, with a little. They've probably got an agent. We'll probably see them having their own strength and conditioning coach, their own physio, maybe their own batting coach that they kind of take with them, and maybe their own psychologist, and you just see them sort of parachute into these environments for 4 weeks, and then they parachute somewhere else, and they parachute somewhere else, and so I think it's that and how that really changes the dynamic based on our conversation around scheduling. Crikey, I don't know what this does for scheduling and availability of players. So I think there's a wider issue of kind of contracts and what it does domestically, but equally what this kind of now is saying about what players want and what players know. And I'm aware of players that kind of have, they'd be affiliated with a county but would have their own personal support, which is I never thought I'd see that. It's like a golfer or a tennis player with their own staff, even though they're getting that at the club, that they would be taking these people with them virtually or physically. So, um, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the James Vince Limited is really kind of clicked in my head, and the golfer and tennis. So yeah, I do think that's interesting. I wonder, it'd be fascinating to hear what the likes of Bolt and people that have done that, whether they've felt that way. I guess speaking to a few people that have done that. It does feel like a little bit of a lonely life, maybe more than than obviously the team
Mm,
environment. I think that raises some questions whether people actually enjoy that. But people coming to the end of their career, I guess you've got to make the most of your limited opportunities, your limited lifespan, I guess, as a sports person. I suppose the big thing will be, I mean, Binksy was alluding in that chat to, like you said, if it opens the floodgates and we get a lot of younger players starting to do that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
if England is going to have a hard line and say, well, if you do that, then you're not eligible, because Finn Allen has essentially done that here in New Zealand, but you know that's I think that's quite different because the door is still, we could have picked him for, if I'm sure if he was performing, then New Zealand cricket would have said, okay, cool. Well, you're doing a great
Mm.
job. We'd love to have you for the Champions Trophy. And then he would have been there. But yeah, anything to add, Raj?
No, nothing really on that. It is an interesting concept, and it's the way that I remember we did a "How is 2020 going to change the world" pod, and this was right up there, and it's all just sort of coming into life now, isn't it? That's sort of just the way things are. On the PSL, I did have a couple of notes. If you're ready to sort of pivot to that,
Mm.
what a masterstroke to change that window to the same time as the IPL for the PSL. A lot of Kiwis got picked up in that PSL draft as well. Finn Allen, Daryl Mitchell, Adam Milne was the one we missed earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Bracewell, Mark Chapman, Kyle Jamieson, and Kane Williamson. So there's going to be a lot of New Zealanders playing cricket at that time, which is good. Where a lot of the times we have these guys selected in the IPL auction and they don't always get a good run of it. We're waiting to see them come off the bench and they don't really. But here they can go to the PSL and get some game time, which is going to be good to see. And it is an interesting one because it puts it back on the boards, the sort of various associations around the world, like the ECB, to go, well, you had an IPL window. Why can't you have a window for the
Mm.
PSL that's going to be at the exact same time? So why can't we have that open as well? So yeah, it's a very interesting masterstroke from the PSL to change that window.
Totally, I love that for what they've done there, and for all the reasons you've said. I think again, if we're New Zealand has specifically set out a window in our international cricket. I mean, every now and again we do have tours during that time. We've been to Pakistan. I think we've got a tour. Pakistan comes here late in March and April. I don't quite know the dates. It must be maybe our our PSL players will jump on the plane and go back, with the guys that are in that Pakistan side as
It ends
well.
the 5th of April is the end of that tour.
Yeah, okay, and then the PSL must start not long after that. So yeah, I think it's great, and I mean, I mean, really, that in my head, that's how you sort of fix some of the scheduling issue, is that you have a couple of windows that are, all of the places around the world that have, the weather at that time play in that window, and then the other ones play in a summer window here in New Zealand, and the counter to that is that there'll be the IPL and the 100 and all of these other, they all want the best players, and if the best players aren't, you don't want they don't want to be seen as, oh well, it's all the players who didn't make the IPL are now in the PSL, and
Mm.
I'm sure the leagues themselves don't want to seem that they're second best, third best when they're all ranking those things. So it's interesting, but in terms of as a viewer, that's what I'd like to see. I mean, we've ticked over the hour mark. I will give you one last opportunity, Jamie, before we wrap up the show. I know you mentioned Jimmy Anderson. Do you want to just give him a quick shout out before we end the show?
I think what did I call him? The Ryan Giggs of cricket, didn't I? It's kind of like it's sort of he, yeah, amazing that even at that age and that experience, he's the fire's still burning. He feels like he still wants to do it. I think a lot of publicity is given around professional sports people that they're all money orientated and they do it for that. But I think what possibly he's demonstrating is actually, there's a lot of intrinsic value to him playing cricket. Yeah, he still feels as though he can do it. He's going to do it. No, he's not doing it for free, clearly. But I think it's important to recognise that not everybody is motivated by loads of cash, and actually there is a bit of they love the sport. They get a lot of self-worth from it. Um, yeah, fascinating, really. It'd be interesting to see how long he goes beyond this as well. But also I think it'd be interesting to see how he goes. First of all, there's been a bit of a break, hasn't there? And um, thinking, April, 12 degrees. How's his body going to feel with that? New ball in hand. What's that
What
going
is
to
he
look like?
actually?
And
What is he signed up for, Jamie?
is it actually? It is one day, isn't it? It's not. It's not 4 day. I don't think it is a 1 day contract. So yeah, he probably
Is
won't be
it not
playing
a
in April.
is it not a full day? Is it not a full county contract?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not totally sure. I think it is more of a 1 day actually. Now you've mentioned that. So um, yeah. So maybe he's picking and choosing when the weather might be slightly more in his favour.
And
Yeah, and
maybe
probably
because is he going
yeah.
to still be coaching? Do we sort of know what's happening there?
Yeah, well, he's kind of gone quiet on his England role, hasn't he? His consultancy role. I imagine he'd still be probably doing that. Um, yeah, yeah, it's fun.
And
Yeah, go on, Raj. Have you
it
got?
is a county championship and 20 T20 Blast contract.
So
So he
it could
will.
be it. It could be April, 12 degrees. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Which
Beautiful.
again, does demonstrate probably, he cares about this stuff and wants to do it. It'd be easy to do the white ball only contract, wouldn't it? So, you know, yeah.
Very cool. Well, yeah, watch the space. A bit more interest in the county championship, and I'm sure the Lancashire games now that they'll be able to rock up and see Jimmy Anderson. We've obviously bounced around a lot of different topics over the past hour or so. So thanks for sticking with us. It's been a very Pakistan heavy podcast for sort of surprisingly, but yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on around the world at the moment. We'll be back hopefully to a full complement next week. Binksy hopefully back from his illness, and Baldy back from his traveling around the world and having fun in the snow and all the other things that he's been doing. I won't. We'll still make it a where in the world is Michael Baldwin. We won't give away his secrets, but yeah, hopefully you'll be there to join us again next week. And thanks very much.